Thanks, Joy. Good morning, everybody. And really thanks to Joy for her patience and perseverance on this program. We started our initial conversation in December, and so here we are in May. And so I thank her for her time to get everything put together and to bring me in front of you. I have been working with libraries and library security and safety for 24 years now. And what I'm best known for in this country is workplace violence. I wrote the first book in the country on workplace violence, the first business book on workplace violence back in 1994. That book was called Ticking Bombs. I interviewed a double murderer, a guy that killed two people. I interviewed him in prison. And I was busy doing that all the way up through Columbine in 99 and doing school violence prevention and K through 12 and colleges and universities. A lot of work in healthcare. And what happened was I was sitting in my office in San Diego, typical day for me, admiring my muscles, looking out the window. And I got a phone call from a group called Info People in California. And Info People was a grant-funded program they still exist in Sacramento, California. And they said, can you help us with library security? And this was year 2000. And I said, well, what could be going on at the library where you'd need a guy like me? And they said, can you get on a plane and come up and start coming to some of the libraries we're having the most issues? And these are libraries we're still having issues with if you see the news and watch videos and whatnot. Oakland, San Francisco, Berkeley, San Jose, Sacramento, Los Angeles, city and county libraries there, and even in my own city where I was from in San Diego. So I started going to all these libraries in California and working on issues related to safety and security for the staff and the usual concerns that you see in larger urban libraries, certainly homelessness and mental health issues and substance abuse and just a general sense of conflict between people that are not happy about the answers that they get. And so that kind of started my career. And so I was just wanted to kind of give you a quick rundown of what I've been doing. About 2010, I started working for the ALA, and they said, can you write a book about library security? And being a bear of small brain, I said, how about if we call it Library Security, which is what it was called. It came out in 2015. So that book's been out almost 10 years now. And the book, if you've been around library world for a while, took the place of a book called The Black Belt Librarian by Warren Graham. And so that was kind of a 90s, I think 96, 97 book that came out. And so my book was sort of a substitute for that. And then about 2022, I got contacted about doing a sequel to the book, which I did for Rowman and Littlefield. That book was called The Safe Library, and it just came out February of last year. So it's been out a little bit over a year. So I've been around the United States, 28 states, not Vermont yet. You're on my list. Vermont, I was telling Joy, Vermont, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Maine. The two Dakotas and Alaska are the only places I've not been to in my working career. But I'm a Baltimore guy by birth, and I always love the East Coast, and the food is always great compared to where I am now in Missouri. They think Taco Bell is pretty good cuisine out here in Missouri. I have a relationship with Library 2.0. And you can see those folks at library20.com. It's run by a guy named Steve Hargadon. Hargadon is an educator by training and a library guy. He does a lot of programs for San Jose State University and a lot of mini conferences for them. We do 2 podcasts, 2 blogs a month at Library 2.0, which are free. It's free to sign up. And we also do 1 or 2 paid webinars each month on a variety of topics. We just did one yesterday on conflict resolution between staff and also with patrons. So you can also go to thesafelibrary.com, and if you're a dog fan, I've got some videos with my dog Layla, the beagle. She sits on my lap where we talk for about 2 minutes or so on some safety and security tips. You can see those at thesafelibrary.com, or you can also see them at library20.com under the Safe Library tab. Or you can just go to YouTube and put in The Safe Library and they'll pop up. There's about 27 or 28 of them. I do one a week. And it's just my dog and me talking about library stuff. So again, thanks to Joy for our conversation. I did this program back in the day, I can't remember how many years ago, for the Association of Rural and Small Libraries. And it was part of one of their online conferences. And I did that session. And then I started getting contacted by libraries around the country, and really libraries, state associations around the United States as well, to say, can you help us with some of the issues that smaller libraries face, 1-person, 2-person libraries, that the bigger libraries do not face at all? And one of the things I got from that early conversation was that sometimes you're expected to be psychologist, security guard, cop, lawyer, library professional, all rolled into one. And the other part is that you are expected somehow sort of by the work culture or by your own sort of sense of, I have to protect this place with my life. This is like a fort, right? I can't leave the property. What I want you to think about is you have options. And sometimes you say, well, I'm supposed to be in charge of this building for 8 to 10 hours. And I say, yeah, we're the shepherds of these buildings. And that's a concept I want you to think about. Being the shepherd of the building means that you have a right to take care of it and a right to enforce policy and the code of conduct, but you also have a duty of care for yourself. And so we're going to talk a little bit in this conversation about intuition. And intuition tells you, if you say, I don't like this person's behavior, conduct, interaction with me, I'm going to go outside and get in the car and drive off. I'm okay with that if you have a righteous reason to do that. I know you want to do your job and protect the materials and the facility and all that, but I also want you to be safe first. And I think about these things a lot different than other people because I've been a security guy since I was 21, and I'm only 29 now, so that's 8 long years I've been working in this field. And I think about sort of the different ways that men and women see safety and security. My daughter and my wife see things a lot different than I do. And so I respect where you are in terms of how you see your facility as a place that deserves protection, but I want you to think about protecting yourself first. So you can certainly see more about what I'm doing at Library 2.0. Sign up for free. We try not to pepper you too much with emails, but we do a lot of programs and whatnot that we do some stuff on library wellness with employees and stress management. Loida Garcia, who's the former ALA president, is also on the staff there as well. So happy to have you come over and sign up if that's what you want to do. So I'm driven by a book that some of you may know. If you ever watched Oprah, this is a book that shows up on Oprah a lot. This guy, his name is Gavin DeBecker, and DeBecker is the security guard to anybody who's important or famous in Hollywood. He protects Bobby Kennedy's presidential campaign. He protects some girl named Taylor Swift. I'm not sure what she does, but everybody seems to like her. He protects anybody who's important or famous in Hollywood, has been doing it for 40 plus years. Started out protecting Elizabeth Taylor. So DeBecker, you can see his book certainly on Amazon. It's a huge bestseller. Oprah loves the book. She always talks about it. He's come out with a couple updated versions, but you can go to giftoffear.com and see DeBecker's masterclasses. I think he has 4 hours, which are free, which you can watch him being interviewed by folks talking about safety and security. And really one of the drivers in his conversation is intuition and what he calls knowing without knowing why. And he says that as human beings, we suppress our intuitive feelings. We say stuff like, I'm being ridiculous, or what's the big deal, or I'm overreacting, when in reality, you should say, I need to get some help, or I need to get out of here, or I need to defend myself, whatever it happens to be. So we all have situations in our life where we wished we had heard and listened to the little voice, and we're glad sometimes that we did listen to the little voice. Now, if you're hearing more than one little voice, see me afterwards and I'll make an appropriate psychiatric referral for you. But the little voice tells you what to do in terms of space and distance and whether to continue a conversation with somebody or to break off or get help from a colleague if you work in a library where there's more than one of you, which we're going to talk about as well. And so it's what doctors call piloerections. You get that hair on your arm stand up, the hair on the back of your neck stands up. Intuition as a sensation in our body really triggers the 3 biggest nerve endings in our body: our gut, our actual stomach, right, our heart, and our head. There's tons of neurons there. It tells you what to do. And so if you think, I wonder if I should call the cops, call the cops. And if you say, I wonder if I should disengage with this person and ask them to leave, do that. And if you say to yourself, I wonder if I should get a colleague to come help me and change that ratio of confrontation, then do that. And so I'm a big fan of his concepts in intuition. And I know that a lot of people who have read his book say it resonates with them. And so, if you want to get a copy, it's a fast read, and I think it's very insightful. So I've been doing this work for a long time, and my sense is that your library, you know better than I do, certainly. The size of it, the location, but I want you to think about the fact that your library could be different than one that's 5 miles away in terms of sort of the feel, the work culture, the kind of sense of it, who comes in, who does come in or who doesn't. One library in the same town and another library across town could be completely different patrons in terms of compliance and behavior and things like that. Students, frequent flyers, people who are sort of eccentric, things like that could vary from library to library. If you're a supervisor, a manager, a director, or you want to be one day and you're moving into a leadership position, think about how you can take some of the things we're talking about and apply them to coaching and feedback and performance evaluation and discussion about best practices. A lot of the stuff I talk about is really best suited for staff meetings, where we get people together and say, let's figure out the best way to handle this type of scenario. And I have some scenarios for you to consider here today. What's the best way for us to demonstrate consistency in our approach? And I'm really big on this idea of enforcing the code of conduct in such a way that it's reasonable and appropriate and legal, and that we're patient and empathic, but also that we keep this idea of being the shepherds in mind, and we have a right to enforce our code of conduct. So think about the things that you may deal with in a smaller library, a rural library, that your colleagues in larger cities perhaps do not. Opening and closing, kids left behind, students, the internet. No special favors means that there could be some town eccentrics, people that want you to do things that are sort of way outside the scope of your work. Can you loan me money? Stuff like that. And then our sense of this conversation is that we want to build employee trust in your own systems and your code of conduct and your own sense of intuition, and build trust about your sense of how to handle sometimes these unique situations involving sometimes eccentric, interesting people. I never used the phrase which I used to use, which I started out in the library world, which was difficult patrons. I call them challenging. I think you have the same sort of perspective I do. Not all of them are difficult. Little old ladies, little kids, people that have substance abuse issues. They're not always difficult, but they can be challenging in terms of our interaction with them. And then we want to, build public trust, which is we want to make this place a safe place to come with your kids, a safe place to come if you're elderly, a safe place to come if you need a quiet space to think and work and read and study and whatever you want to do. And so look at the second to the last one. They're sort of the watchwords of our conversation here: patience and empathy and flexibility and support. Starting with each other, we take care of our coworkers first, we take care of the public second, and that's really how it should be. But look at these words: patience, empathy, flexibility, and support. Abstract, right? They're not concrete phrases, right? It's like liberty is not a concrete phrase, it's an abstract phrase, right? How do we demonstrate in a concrete way patience with people? Good listening skills, right? How do we demonstrate empathy with people, which is, we're neutral with our body language. We don't roll our eyes or sigh or look at our phone, right? We are empathic in their struggle or their situation. They may be coming from some sort of trauma background, coming from some sort of mental health problem, some sort of issue which they need help. And their patience with us maybe is not great, and their communication skills with us is not great, and we need to be better. Flexibility, where we have flexibility of thought in terms of how we enforce policies and code of conduct, that it's not rigid, that we do things on behalf of the patron to make it easier for them to use our facilities. And then this idea of support is, how do we take care of each other? That we support our coworkers, that we support our coworkers in stressful encounters with people. We change those ratios of confrontation, we come over and help. And then the last one is really the lifeguard model, which when you think about it, it sounds sort of selfish, but basically if you're a lifeguard, you can't drown at the beach. If you're a lifeguard, your first duty of care is to care for yourself, to save yourself, and then save everybody else afterwards. And so when I think about anything around safety and security, I'm a workplace violence guy. I've been doing this for 32 years in the workplace violence arena. I think about, you got to take care of yourself first, take care of your coworkers second, take care of the patrons third. Steve, what about the little kids in an emergency? I get it. Take care of yourself first, coworkers second, patrons third. You are no good to anybody else, is the point I'm trying to make, if you're not safe first. So get yourself to a position of safety or a location of safety in a stressful situation. We'll talk a wee bit here in our conversation about workplace violence. Quite rare in libraries. Happens, unfortunately. I've seen a cop got shot in Memphis and killed in a library there. We've had two ladies in the library killed in Clovis, New Mexico by a 16-year-old perpetrator. So these things are rare, but they happen. I want you to have a sense of the run, hide, fight model, which is the national protocol for these issues, and the rare possibility these things ever happen. But you got to take care of yourself first, coworkers second, and everybody else third. And I hope that makes sense to you. It's not a selfish model. It's a I can't help others if I'm not safe concept. So think about the people that come into your library. You may have a pretty good understanding of some of the challenges that they face. Trauma history, the ALA and Library Journal have done a lot of articles, especially written by library folks that also have social worker background, about people that have been exposed to trauma. Something called the ACE, or the Adverse Childhood Experience chart. For some people, it's quite high. It's sexual abuse, physical abuse, domestic violence, horrible things that happen to these people as children, and it affects their behavior with you as adults. It affects their sense of fear and anxiety and impatience sometimes. They're fearful of the future. Sometimes their interactions with people are not very patient. Sometimes we have people with delusional beliefs that they're political drivers, the earth is flat and we didn't actually go to the moon, that kind of a sense. We have people that have financial, healthcare, food, shelter concerns, makes their day-to-day living very stressful. Sometimes they take it out on us, or they simply are just exhausted by the time we come to them, and that's where our empathy kicks in. You're expected to know a lot about what's going on in your community in terms of resources and help for that population, just because they see you as the problem solver of last resort. The substance use issue in this country is just out of control. I've been teaching substance abuse for supervisors and managers since 2000, and I've never seen the fentanyl issue as bad as it's been. I mean, alcohol is number one in this country, but I've never seen the fentanyl issue as bad as it is. Over at Library 2.0, I did a program on the fentanyl issue in libraries, and I interviewed a guy named Tom Wolfe, and he's in San Francisco, a recovering addict and former homeless person that's now going around trying to help these addicts. And it's just really difficult work that's a huge challenge for him every day because of this stuff is just everywhere. Untreated mental health issues with some patrons. Their behavior is not so problematic that the police come, but their behaviors can be problematic. Sometimes their disconnect with reality is a little bit fearful and frightening for you. Sometimes their disconnect with reality is that they make other people afraid in the library as well. Some people that we come in contact with have a criminal justice system contact all the time, warrants and traffic tickets, and they're in and out of jail for various things. That makes their life stressful as well. Digital divide, fear of missing out, fear of being left out. Younger people, older people that don't have access to computers or tablets or any of the internet things that we take for granted are looking to you for support and help on that. And I guess, there's a sense, if you look at the last one, that the library becomes the community problem solver for certain things. You're expected to know resources and help and support. And lots of library folks that I talk to are really skilled. Here's how you get help with your Social Security, and here's how you get help with your taxes, and here's how you get Eclipse classes and anything else that comes up. You're really skilled at doing that. So I applaud your efforts there of being a fountain of information for people that you come in contact with. So some of these things you may know dealing with people, they may reveal things to you, you may discover them, you may see what's going on with them in terms of their appearance. It sort of gives you a sense of what challenges that they face. And so when we look at this, there's a dignity awareness that we're using good eye contact and we're not staring at people, we're not being dismissive. Then we have non-judgmental body language. You don't sigh or roll our eyes or look away. That we're patient with people that are impatient. We're good listeners with people who are not very good listeners. And most of the time in some of the tools that I'm going to talk with you about in terms of getting to kind of a conflict resolution tools or some of the de-escalation tools we're going to talk about, you may have to repeat them more than once. Why? Because people don't listen to you. You may have to say to this person, please do this, or can you do this for me? Can I ask you to do this? What we're doing is this concept, which I'll talk about, it's kind of a negotiated behavioral agreement. The negotiated behavioral agreement says I can do something positive for you, patron, if you do something positive for me. And I'm not willing to help you if you curse at me or threaten me or do something that's not reasonable in this space here, but I am willing to help you. And can you do something good for me if I can do something good for you, right? And so it's sort of this trade-off of looking for this negotiated behavioral agreement, which is I can set boundaries, I can enforce policy without being overly aggressive, but also don't let people trample over my personal space or personal feelings. Calming tones, empathic approach. Empathy says, I can see how that's an issue for you. Empathy says, I'm sorry you're stuck in that situation. It sounds rough. Let me take some notes about what we need to work on. Let me capture what you're talking about so I know I have it right. I mean, those are empathic approaches. And we look at people that are stuck in difficult situations. Sometimes the library, again, becomes the problem solver of last resort. So the last one's really my sort of collection of again, behaviors, which I am asking you to put into a concrete way. Firm, fair, consistent, reasonable treatment of everybody. Firm means we have the right to protect our facility and to operate it as a business, right? Fair means we treat everybody the same. I don't care what you look like, I just care what you do. So your appearance doesn't matter to me, it's your behavior which matters to me, right? That we're consistent, meaning Monday through Saturday or Monday through Sunday, however often you're open, that you and your colleagues, if it's more than one of you, treat everybody the same in terms of a fair and consistent application of policy, not like this in terms of up, down, up, down. Sometimes we enforce this code of conduct issue, sometimes we don't, because you may have seen this, whether you have kids or you've seen it in your own service work, which is the minute we are not consistent, people start making policy violations, code of conduct issues, and things like that, where they go, well, I got away with this yesterday, and the person that was here didn't say anything. And then we get into that stuck situation where he's like, I have to enforce stuff that I didn't see. And so, Monday through Saturday, Monday through Sunday, however often you're open, there's a sense that we do stuff the same way. And then reasonable is a court-tested phrase. I do a lot of expert witness stuff on HR things, and reasonable means that were we reasonable in our application of our policy? Were we reasonable in our treatment of this patron? Are we reasonable in our code of conduct? Has it been vetted by a lawyer and a library board, and has it been updated, and is it reasonable, right? Those of you who've been around a while, think of all the times you thought, why do we have a no vaping marijuana policy in the library now? Because it needs to be there, right? So think of all the things that have been added in over the last couple of years, which perhaps you didn't think about as now it's pretty common. So I look at these things in green as kind of our structure, as kind of our operating umbrella, is the things that are important to us: dignity, awareness, patience, calming tones, empathic approach, boundary setting, right? And then firm, fair, consistent, reasonable treatment of everybody. So what I see in the rural world is a sense that you sometimes may have several colleagues with you. Great. You may be by yourself. I see people that come in at 9 o'clock in the morning and go home at 6, and they're then their entire day by themselves. And I've seen the law enforcement response in some of my rural libraries 2 hours away. So we'll talk about things like maybe getting help from the volunteer fire department or the state patrol barracks, or how we can get some security services as part of it, maybe a subscription type of thing, which we'll talk about. Most rural libraries don't have a security guard and don't have a lot of security devices, meaning I don't see oftentimes a lot of cameras, alarm systems, panic alarms, things at the desk that allow you to lock the door from without getting up from your seat. One of the things I think about is one way in, one way out in a rural library. And I realize some of you may work in, especially in the East Coast, really historic buildings, been around for a long time, built in 18 whatever. But I would say in my world, if there's one way in and one way out of the library, I'm going to demand, whether it's my boss or the alderman or the board of supervisors or the city council members or the mayor or a library board, that you cut a door for me in the back. You may have to move some bricks and put in a frame and do that, but I need a back way out of this place. That's where I park my car, and I can get away as necessary in an emergency. The safe room, which is a concept that I've been talking about my entire career, which is how you move to a safe place in a potential violent situation. Doesn't necessarily mean guns, but somebody who's assaultive. Could be the bathroom in some libraries. That's the only room you can lock. That's the only door that has a lock, right? You may not have a training room or a break room, a supervisor's office that other people have in larger libraries, and maybe the bathroom. And this concept that I've talked about, excuse me, where library employees are expected to, quote, hold down the fort, meaning there's a really problematic person here and I have to stay here and deal with this person even though I feel afraid. That's not what your job duties and issues are, right? I want you to be able to think on your feet and be able to say, intuitively, not a great situation, I can disconnect and leave if I have to. Look at this one: indifferent or uninformed elected officials. They don't realize what you may be dealing with in terms of behavioral concerns, which is why we're going to talk about something which is significant called the Security Incident Report. The Security Incident Report says, I can make a description of what took place with this person, where the cops came, or I'd ask this person to leave, or they assaulted somebody, or they assaulted me, or they stole from the library, did something, and I have a documented report on this so that we can look at this person's behavior over a span of time and decide what to do. And that also we can use security incident reports as leverage to say we need better police help, or we need better security devices. And if you've worked around bureaucracies and elected officials, as I have in my entire career, most of my clients are government, they need documentation, they need proof. And so, here's a collection of security incident reports over the last 3 months that tell us what we need to do differently in our facility in terms of security solutions. The types of problematic patrons that you have could be vastly different. People that are coming from other cities passing through, travelers, right? Local eccentrics, people that are sort of frequent flyer miles, that they're not necessarily super problematic, but they can just be difficult in terms of their odd behaviors and the things that they request. And, sometimes they use hate speech, and sometimes their hygiene is not great. There's just a lot of things going on that you may deal with. And so I'm going to give you, and this is the most important part of our conversation to this point, I'm going to give you some things that you may not think of ever having done. I'm going to give you some tools for your toolkit. You're like, what would I do that for? And then you might find out later it works. I'll give you an example. I've worked a lot in training Shell station employees and gas stations and convenience stores about robbery prevention. I've been doing that a long chunk of my career. And sometimes when I'm saying when you're working by yourself, you go, "Hey Larry, I'll help this gentleman here. You just keep stocking the beer. I'll you can come out when you're all done, even when you're by yourself." So the phantom employee, and we can do this in the library. Hey, you know, hey Phil, I'll take care of this gentleman here. And just I'll come and talk to you when I'm all done, even though you're by yourself. What you're trying to say is, there's another person in this building here, even though it's just me by myself. So that kind of phantom employee stuff is certainly outside the box. You don't see that anywhere except in books that I write about how you may do something unique and different to keep yourself safe. So I have a bunch of ideas like that. I think, from your perspective, take what you need from our time and use that for what you think is useful and what fits your library environment. So a couple things that I see a lot of behavioral issues in libraries, rural and other ones, about sort of compliance, which is you can't tell me what to do. And so it's sort of built into the culture that people are problematic and arguing. Younger people a lot seem to be, as we see around the country, this problematic behavior. You can't tell me what to do. Second one, open carry. And this, in Vermont, who knows, it's different county by county, as it is here in Missouri. It's different county by county, but we have a lot of open carry people and we have a lot of concealed carry. We'll talk a little bit about that. Third one I see is that there's been some significant changes in this country on service animals, as opposed to the old days, which was, well, this is my emotional comfort snake, or my emotional comfort guinea pig, or my emotional comfort scorpion, and people are bringing in all kinds of creatures in the library. A lot of states have tightened that up and say there's no more emotional comforts. It's either a service animal, which is a dog, or a small horse. I've yet to see one of those in real life, but that's in the ADA. And so there's a need for, especially when these three issues here, as I look at them, there's a need for consistency in our approach to how we handle these things. We'll talk about it a little bit. So holstered versus unholstered guns, people walking in with long guns into the library, rifles and assault weapons and things like that. I'm always curious as to why they do that. People that have ammo hanging off of them, like, the Wild West. I always look at the context. And so we can freak out in some of these situations. You can call the cops and say, "Hey, there's a guy with a gun in the library. Could you come and talk to him? It's making people uncomfortable." Or you could say, "There's a guy with a gun in the library," which is two different responses by the cops, right? Look at that second piece, therapeutic wonderment questions. Therapeutic wonderment questions. I have a degree in psychology, but I'm not a psychologist. My colleagues, who are clinicians, use these all the time, which is, I'm confused by why you did that, or I'm confused by why you would say that. You can use therapeutic wonderment questions for folks to say, I'm puzzled as to why you would bring that shotgun into the library. What kind is it? And you ask sort of dopey questions you may know the answers to, or maybe you have some knowledge of guns, or somebody else is another patron or colleague does, that can sort of diffuse things by just being sort of curious. And it's all about context, right? Part of the reason people come into public buildings, government buildings with guns, is to be provocative and to bug people and to show that they can. And I agree that in some places it can be legal, but a lot of times it just kind of creeps people out. So I look at the last piece there. What's this person's motivation? Do they want to get you on video, shouting at them? Do they want some sort of confrontation? Do they want the cops to come? Do they want sort of local media coverage? Why do they do this, right? Most people that I know that carry guns concealed don't let anybody know that they ever do, and they don't ever show anything that demonstrates they do. This open carry thing is more of a provocative statement. So you have to figure out, what are the gun laws in my state, and what are the gun laws in my county, and what does this mean in terms of the likelihood? How do I handle the situation without overreacting or underreacting? I don't know what happened with this guy. Either ate bad Mexican food, or he shot himself in the rear end, or he washed his jeans too much. I'm a little fuzzy about how this all works out here. How about service animals versus emotional comfort animals? I've seen a lot of states move away from the idea of, emotional support, emotional comfort, therapy animals, therapy dogs, things like that, to get the little vests and all that online. And now we have a specific, a lot of statutory language that says it's service animal only, or, trained dog or miniature horse. Now, I have 6 dogs, and they're all, wild animals. I have Chihuahuas, so you know what that's like, and a pug, and I have a lab, and I have my beagle, Layla. When you look at our intention here, it's not to be mean to people with animals, but to say, we have a duty of care for the facility, keep it clean, keep people from getting bit or barked at or scared, things like that. And so, look at that second piece: empathic, firm, fair, consistent, reasonable. Don't just say I'm following the law or I don't make the laws. I try not to say the P word to people. And the P word is policy. I use the P word as kind of similar to saying calm down to someone, which has never worked in the history of human beings, right? So instead of saying that's just our policy, or I don't write the policy, sir, you need to speak to the board or the council members. I try not to use the word policy. I try to use the word guidelines, or here's our usual approach, or this is what we typically do, or some of the rules that we try to follow, or this, and this, could I ask you to do that? So if you have that last piece there, if you have this issue, then say, what backs this up for me? Do I have written guidelines I can give them a copy of? Do I have a sense of how do I enforce this in a way that's not creating a big scene, but does the same thing in terms of consistency of message, if that's what's going on in my library? So again, the language we talk about here: firm, fair, consistent, assertive, legal, reasonable applications of our code of conduct. Again, abstract concepts. Legal means somebody looked at it who's got a law degree. Reasonable means that we are reasonable with everybody who comes in. Assertive means that we're not trampling on people, but we have a right to operate our business as a business. That we're consistent Monday through Saturday, Monday through Sunday. That we're firm with everybody and we're fair with everybody. Look at that second piece. We use praise when patrons comply. Hey, thanks for waiting for that. Thanks for sitting over there until I can get that for you. I appreciate your patience. I'm a little busy right now, but give me 5 minutes and I can come over. I appreciate you just hanging out while I get ready to do that for you. Thanks a lot. People want to do the right thing most of the time when we catch them at it. People like praise. People like affiliating around the concept of praise. That we can bend the rules on their behalf as necessary to advocate for them. And the last one I've said before, and I believe this strongly, not only in terms of engaging, but also disengaging, is that we are the shepherds of these buildings. We have the right to protect our building and ourselves and our collections and our materials and our colleagues. So when we think about security changes, policy changes, things that connect to doing things differently in the facility, I think sometimes you can hear, there's nothing we can do, or that's how we've always done it, or, you can't fight City Hall, or that's just how it is, or it's not in the budget, we don't have the money. Those things may be true on the face, but it's amazing how, and you may have seen this in your career or life, that we find money for stuff when bad things happen. When you look at security, oftentimes we are making changes in security policy, posture, and equipment at the point of the sword. Something has happened. We're driven by an event which raises the stakes in terms of the safety of the employees, but also litigation and things like that. So I think we look at how we fix our library in terms of physical security improvements as a step at a time. And you say, they're probably not going to give me $100,000 in the budget to put in cameras and all kinds of stuff, and I probably don't need it. But I might be able to get something in Home Depot or Lowe's in terms of a camera system, and we're going to talk about some other ideas as well, including stealing, or as we call it in the library world, research from other libraries as to what's working for them, what they have done policy-wise, what they have done equipment-wise, what they have done, the types of employee-patron interactions that you may be dealing with the same. So get some great ideas from them. Share that information in our discussions. Folks like Joy can steer you in the right direction around what other libraries are doing around the state. The third one is really critical to me: security incident reports, which is that we don't document every single thing that happened, but if the cops came, or an ambulance came, or the fire department came, or somebody fell or almost fell, or there was a fight, or something got broken, or whatever, we write a security incident report to be able to document what happened, and as necessary, go to our library boards, or library directors, city council members, board of supervisors, whoever it happens to be, and say, we need improvements, we need policy change. And we're driven not by guessing, and we're driven not by sort of anecdotal information, but we're driven by what has been captured in a moment in time. I'll give you an example. Every once in a while, it's not often, but every once in a while, my libraries will call and say, can you help us get a restraining order against this really problematic patron? Okay, great. What's he doing? Or she? This, and this. Okay, let me see the security incident reports. And they go, what? And I go, let me see the collection of their behavior over a span of time. I can't go to a judge or a lawyer who writes the order and gives it to a judge and say, how do we get a restraining order against this person to kick them out of the facility for some span of time, illegally, right? 6 months, 3 years, whatever it is, where there's a court hearing and they have to come explain their behavior. How do we do that without a way to build our case, which is security incident reports? And they go, well, we don't have any of that stuff. I said, well, we're not getting a restraining order. You can't do it based on anecdotes, right? It has to be written down. So the security incident reports, from my perspective, also help us, you and I, with leverage, right? We go to these council members, these electeds, and our lawyers, and say, here's what we need to do. We got some litigation concerns. We have some employee injury concerns, got some work comp concerns, things like that. Last one. This is really significant as well, which is you, especially if you're in charge or you're running the facility, you're in charge of the library, make 2 lists. One list is problematic patrons. Who are your frequent flyers? And you say, I have this list because I want to come up with, using some of the tools we're talking about here, and also conversations with colleagues or my boss or the director or other people, as to what our best practices are with these people, right? If they're problematic and we have the same response, a consistent response, a intelligent response, it minimizes their impact. The second, and equally important, is I use a concept called safety and security stakeholders. The safety and security stakeholders are those people around your library: cops, fire department, EMTs, sheriff's department, state patrol, facilities, IT, any kind of security function, people that can be part of our conversation, employee assistance program, right? Counseling services. Lots of people could be involved in the safety and security stakeholders, meaning do we have a list of the people that are connected by name and telephone number and email address to keeping me and my building safe, and we have that list handy. And we talk to those people, and we develop a rapport with our outside agencies, cops and things like that, even social workers, people that may be able to do services from the county that can be useful for us in certain situations. So here's the deal about me. I've written 26 books. I speak to groups of all sizes almost every day. I've been doing this since '87. I'm an introvert. I'm an introvert trapped in an extrovert's job. My wife is an extrovert. You know, every 5 minutes it's, let's go to this party or let's go talk to these people. I'm like, oh, I just want to go home. I'm an introvert trapped in an extrovert's job, meaning you may be the same way, which is you're introverted, but you have a public contact, transactional, high human contact job all day long. It's tiring, isn't it? When you look at your sense of assertiveness, it may be a kind of a switch that you have to flip that says, I need to be a little more assertive in the situation to set better boundaries with this patron to enforce our code of conduct. Doesn't mean you have to be a jerk about it, but you have to be able to say, I got to get myself into a modality which is perhaps different than what I typically do. And I do that all the time. When I gear up for a conversation or a presentation or a discussion, when in actuality, I'm an introvert. That second piece, I kind of think about this concept and see if it makes sense to you of sort of street theater. Street theater is I'm going to have to talk my way out of the situation by being assertive or acting like I'm not afraid, which in case inside I could be afraid, right? And I want to do it in a way that I talk my way out of this confrontation with this person, or I talk my way out of the building. I need to go get something in the back, walk off and leave the building, right? I need to go get something from my car, walk out and leave the building. I need to step over here and do this, this, and this, and go behind a locked door and call for 911. Make bold safety decisions in terms of leaving the facility. That's a bold decision. If you feel you must, don't wait around to be hurt or assaulted and saying, I have to protect this piece of furniture, this carpet, these books with my life. So we're going to talk about 2 concepts here. One is working alone, and then the second piece is working with a partner, a colleague, maybe more than one, but typically 1 or 2 of you that supports, a one-person working there. So there may be 2 or 3 people in the library. But let's talk about working alone. Again, I want you to think about outside the box thinking. And outside the box thinking is where you say that would never work, and then we ask permission and maybe it happens. Outside the box thinking is we could never do that here, and then you talk to your boss or the library board or somebody and they say, yeah, we're okay with that, you can do it. Or we'll try it, right? First one, if you're by yourself and the police could be far away, right? Could be an hour away or 2 hours. First off, we're going to talk about other alternatives besides the local cops, the local sheriff. Think about other law enforcement agencies that could be in your town. Could be college police, could be community college police, it could be railroad cops, it could be the Border Patrol, it could be customs, it could be immigration, it could be a school resource officer at the high school. There may be people you can get a hold of that are sworn officers to respond to situations that you may not thought about. So that's part of our conversation as well. But think about, and I've done this, I started off doing this in San Diego with churches. I had a bunch of churches as clients. Some of these churches make a pile of money on the weekend, right? On Sundays, they'd have, 5, 6 services, the big ones, the mega churches in San Diego, and they collect a ton of dough. And so Monday morning, some lady from the church office, would take a bank bag with bank on the side of it and walk all this dough out to her car and then drive to the bank and deposit it. Well, that's not safe, right? So what I said is, let's get armored car service. And so you call the armored car service and they say, well, we're in the area anyway. We're 2 blocks away picking up money at this place here. We'll just add this to the route and it costs, a very small amount of money. The same thing I'm talking about here, which is you may have in your town a security service, security guards, and oftentimes what they do is they do drive-bys. And their drive-bys, like I check on this construction site 5 times a day, or I come by this little strip mall 4 times a day, or I come by this area that's, a homeowners association pays me and I drive through it 4 times a day. Can we add the library to that security patrol? Can you pay to be included into that drive-by? Now, the guy may never get out the car or the truck. He just looks in and sees you're still vertical, right? But that would be a protocol, right? When I look inside, do I see the library employee, or do I get a wave from the library employee and then I drive off to my next location? So again, that would be one, is the security patrol. The other one, create a twice daily check-in call-in protocol, which is maybe there is a larger library up the road, down the road from me. It's an hour away. It's 20 minutes away. They have more staff than I'm just here by myself. We have an existing protocol where they call me right after I open, and I call them right after I open and just say hello, and then see at the end of the day, and I call them as I'm leaving at the end of the night to say everything went fine. So maybe you do this twice daily check-in. Kind of related to that, do you have the ability through the internet and the camera systems, and you can get pretty cheap stuff, online for camera systems, to install a camera system that could be monitored off-site? So you have a larger library location, let's say it's 100 miles away, and they can see you all day long on the camera. Now, they're not spying on you, it's not Big Brother, but they're looking to make sure you're still okay, and they can see you as you do your work throughout the day, and that camera system, that camera monitor is posted somewhere in their library facility where staff or supervisors can see it as they're working or as they walk by. And then the other part of cameras, I like the idea of telling people there's cameras. Smile, you're on TV. This place is protected by cameras. I like that sense. Now, I get it. Banks get robbed. I get the perspective, and they're not perfect. But cameras do have a deterrence value because, in my day, the camera images were horrible, and we would get these fuzzy pictures and say, is this a mammal? I can't even tell, maybe this is a human being. I can't tell, it's just so blurry. Right now, their images are crystal clear. Now you can take those same images and make a digital photograph or a printed out photograph from the cops, and they can go do their thing. So I like the idea of cameras as not a perfect deterrent, but it does drive away people that want to do stuff like fake slip and falls or assault people. People still do crimes where they wear hoods and masks and gloves. I get it. But it helps if they know that they're on TV. And especially the kind that seem to work the best is you put a monitor in the front lobby of the library where someone walks in and sees himself on camera, right? There is a deterrent value for that. Third one. Again, in a perfect world, you would have a panic alarm that was under the circ desk or the main desk or at your desk or whatever, and you could press that and it would ring to the PD. Usually the default to that is it rings to an alarm company that's, an 800 number somewhere, and they call back and ask, what's going on. There's a code word, if you don't say, oranges and apples, they're going to send the cops. So what also could happen in this situation in a less than perfect world is that if you have more than one employee in your facility, you could press a panic alarm, which would ring to the back office. And so someone sitting back there doing, desk work or whatever would see or hear that you need some help. The function of the panic alarm is to change the ratios of confrontation. The function of the panic alarm is to get people to respond to you as necessary. And so I'm not a huge fan of personal panic alarms. People wear these in, mental health hospitals and other places where it rings and, it makes a noise. I'm not against them, but I'm not seeing a lot of efficacy that they work. But if you do have a panic alarm, the ideal, the best practices would be it rings to an alarm company. And if they don't hear from you, they dispatch the cops. Fourth one, I'm a big fan of pepper spray. I've been sprayed so many times, I put it on my eggs. It's delicious, right? It's not going to kill you. It burns, right? I've been doused with it, to the point I can't see, and I can't drive a car, but I can still function. I've been training pepper spray people for years in a 4-hour program. I like it a lot. I have my daughter carry it. She's in Miami, 31 years old. I like it a lot. The value of pepper spray is that it is on you and not just nearby. And so rummaging through your purse or your backpack or, some place you have it is not useful. It needs to be on your body. If you get some, don't get bug spray or wasp spray or bear spray. That stuff's caustic and can burn people's faces. Not useful. Get OC, oleoresin capsicum pepper spray. If you get some, you don't have to get a canister the size of, the Riot Cops, looks like a can of hairspray, but don't get the kind that's about the size of a lipstick tube or a chapstick tube. That's too small. There's kind of a middle ground, which is about the size of a little bit smaller than a water bottle and about the size of like a deodorant stick, something like that. You want to get OC pepper spray that has the highest concentration percentage that it can be. I think it's around 1% or 2%. Some of the stuff you see at the convenience store or liquor store is not strong enough. Now, the stuff's not perfect. It doesn't work on enraged maniacs all the time, but I've used it on enraged maniacs and it's worked. I've used it on horrible dogs and it's worked. When you look at pepper spray, what you do is you spray a little bit on your finger and you wipe it under your eye. Why? Because you want to note its effects. Now, the solution is a little bit of baby shampoo mixed with water. Don't pour it in your eye, but use baby shampoo with water diluted to wipe it away. What it says is, if I get this stuff on me, I'm not going to die. It doesn't take away my breathing. I don't stop breathing. It just burns, right? And it burns for a while. And if you get a face full as a bad guy, right, you're going to run off and go, that was not a wise thing to do to assault this person. Some of the pepper spray that I've seen also has dye in it. So you say, which of these purple-faced idiots was the guy that tried to harm you? And you go, that purple-faced idiot over there. So I like pepper spray. It's not useful if it's in your car or your purse or your backpack, or it's not on your body somewhere. You don't have to have it hanging out, but you can cover it up, but it needs to be on you. Last one, if you are fearful and you work in an environment where you say, I need another being in the building, and if it's not going to be an employee, can I bring my dog to work? If you have the type of dog where they could be useful. I'm not talking about a attack dog, just I have a pug, not the best dog for the situation I'm talking about. But my lab might be, right? And so sometimes you say, no one will ever let me do this. This has never happened in the history of the library. And you go, well, why don't you ask? And why don't you ask by email? And if they tell you no, then keep that email and say, then I'll revisit this 6 months from now, or I'll revisit this after there's a significant incident where I want to go back and have them think about it again. I hope that makes sense to you. So we talked about the phantom coworker, right? The phantom coworker is trying to plant the seed in some person that you get a weird vibe from that there's somebody else there that could be working in the building. Second one, escape plan. Park your car near the exit door. Say, Steve, I can't park in the fire zone. The fire department, the police department give me a ticket. Yeah, okay. Maybe you have your car next to the building, and then when you go to lock up at the end of the night, you move your car next to the exit door, right? Hide your valuables. Purse, backpack, wallet, cell phone. Put that stuff back behind the scenes where nobody can get it, and then create a robbery pack. A robbery pack is just an old wallet or an old purse, a broken cell phone, some fake keys. Give that to the person if there's a robbery situation. Libraries don't get robbed, but people do inside libraries. Last one, safe room. A safe room is a place where you can lock the door. It's not a bulletproof chamber, but it's designed to keep you safe until the cops arrive, however long that takes. It could be a restroom, break room, supervisor's office, some place we store the mops or the file folders, some place we store, the expensive office equipment, whatever it happens to be that you can lock the door. That can be a place where you can go and barricade the door and use your cell phone until help arrives. It's not a perfect solution, but it's not designed to be a bulletproof chamber. It's just designed to get you out of harm's way and the eyesight of the person who is threatening. And then the last one is, again, going back to this idea of how do I leave this facility quickly and creatively. I need to step over here for a second, go out the back door, right? Walk and talk this person to the front door if you can, and then lock the door. I'm a huge fan of being able to lock the main library door from your desk, meaning there's an electric solenoid switch that you press a button under your desk that locks the door. This is for the guy who says, I'm going out to my car. You haven't heard the last of me yet. I'm coming back in here and you'll be sorry you locked the door, right? You don't have to get up and do it with a key. I've seen stupid, designs with Allen wrenches and all kinds of weird stuff. Being able to lock the door from your desk is ideal. So let's talk about colleagues. I'm a big believer in code words. Code words tell your colleague a couple things. One, this is a more stressful situation, pay attention. So let's say the sheriffs or the PD in your town wear green. So you say green uniforms, right? You say call Dr. Green. That means go to a safe place and call for help 911, right? And a couple things about 911. Maybe you know this, maybe you don't. It always surprises people. When you dial 911 on your cell phone in most states, unless you have some sort of unique situation with your dispatch, when you dial 911 on your cell phone, the Vermont State Patrol answers, the state police. When I dial 911 on my cell phone, I get the Missouri Highway Patrol. When I dial 911 on my cell phone at my parents' house, I get the California Highway Patrol. If you dial 911 on your landline phone, the hardline phone, you get the closest regional dispatch center, which is the best choice. So if you have a choice between landline and cell phone, and it's equally safe to use either, use a landline because the response is going to be more rapid. If you have to go to the Vermont State Patrol and then they have to pipe you over to your local PD or sheriff or fire department or emergency service, it's going to take a while. The second code word is leave the building. So that's a code word that says, bring me the purple file, which means leave the building. And then the other one, help me now, come help me now, could be a couple gestures. And I do these gestures sort of as the come help me now. One gesture is I point to my colleague and I point at my feet. That means come over and stand by me. I may need your help. Maybe you're bilingual, you got better technical skills. This person's quite upset. Maybe it helps if you're standing next to me. So if I point my finger down at your feet. The other one is I may point my finger and put my hand up, which means just come over and kind of hang out. Be in the area, don't have to jump in, but I want to change the ratios of confrontation, just have you kind of come over and help me. So think about those code words. Now, if you say, call Dr. Green and the person says, we don't have a Dr. Green, then we forgot the code word, right? Those are important. Talk with your colleagues about how you handle frequent flyers. What's your consistent approach? You don't have to chart it out chapter and verse, but you want kind of a consistency of message to say, here's what we typically say to this person every time. When they come in and make demands, or they come in and they're insulting, or they come in and do this, or they say that, here's what we typically say. You can't do that if you want to stay here is one of my favorite phrases. You can't do that if you want to stay here, says to the person who is being challenging, who's being obnoxious, difficult, is you decide, right? I'm not telling you what to do. We have code of conduct. I'm not telling you what to do, but you can't do what you're doing if you want to stay here. I have another phrase, which you'll love me for later on when you use it. You can send me an email, which oftentimes what I use with kids, or their parents, which is our insurance won't let you do that. It's a great phrase because it's hard to prove. Our insurance won't let you do that is an interesting phrase because it's hard to prove and it's probably true, right? It's whatever they're doing, trying to skateboard off the building into the fountain or something like that is not what our insurance will allow. Last one, think about this concept of alignment. Alignment is where you are the best person to handle this challenging patient, or it's a colleague. Right, there's more than one of you, and you say, in this situation, every time she sees me, it seems to go okay. Every time he sees me, he gets ballistically angry. Every time you come over, you make him mad, so I'll take care of it, or vice versa. So every time I deal with this person, they say, I don't want to talk to you, I want to talk to your colleague, which is okay, trade off. So alignment, and this is interesting, is based on how the other person perceives you in terms of age, race, gender, previous contact, previous experience, where it went well. They see themselves reflecting in you, or it didn't go so well. And we've all had the situation too, especially if you worked in a larger organization, where your boss comes over and says the exact same thing you just said, and the person complies. And you're like, I just said that. Why do they have to hear it from my boss? They want to hear it from your boss. And so that's an alignment thing. Was I'm an important person, I need to speak to a boss, and your boss should say, I bet you said the same thing I just said. Isn't it funny how they had to hear it from me? So in terms of de-escalation, alignment is a critical tool because it says who's the best person to have this conversation with this patron in such a way that it works. And maybe a trade-off where you say, I'm the better fit, then I'll handle it. If you're the better fit, then your colleague handles it. And the other part about alignment, which I think is interesting, is it's really sometimes just an unknown as to why you click with somebody or they respect your perspective. And I think about de-escalation. I've been doing de-escalation training and de-escalation work in my entire career. And it only works, and let's see if this makes sense because it's kind of dopey and obvious. It only works if the other person starts to do it. The other person starts to comply. You can be the best communicator, the best de-escalator on the planet. They don't listen to you. They're not going to do it. Doesn't matter what you say. So they have to go part of the journey as well as you go part of the journey. So that 50-50 part, or 80-20, or whatever it happens to be, they've got to do some work on their own behavior in order for de-escalation to work. And I'm sure you've seen that. So you're working with colleagues, and sometimes you have a sense that this person's behavior is to the point where you need a civil order, a restraining order. We do the best for those things when we give to our library board lawyer or the city attorney or county council or whoever you have, town attorney, a collection of behaviors over a span of time. Not just anecdotal information, but it's been collected. And the critical piece for this is two things. One, The most important one is, does this person make people feel afraid to use or come to the library? Are they fearful of this person because of violence potential? That's significant. And then the second one is, does this person's behavior hurt the business of the library? Meaning it drives people away, it keeps people from coming to the library, it puts a big demand on staff. Those are the two issues that are most cognizant. Second one, think about this. You got some free time in your hands. Walk around the library and go, where are my blind spots? Walk around my library and go, do we have one of those goofy convex mirrors up in the corner, which I can't see anything into? Can I move some shelves, some desks, some furniture, some carts? Can I shift something from one angle to another to improve my sightline where I'm working from? Last one, this is significant, this idea of the icebox. The icebox is in case of emergency. We used to call it a red book. It's a book that the receptionist or front desk or people in public contact would have at a public business or a private business where they sell to the public, that had a bunch of stuff in it, including telephone numbers on a laminated card, copies of keys, callback numbers for emergency situations. Somebody breaks the front window, who do we call that repairs the glass, right? That's what an icebox is for. So it's a red book or an icebox, right? Something that we have a box or a desk drawer that has stuff in it like first aid kit or tourniquets, extra keys for the facility, a map of the facility if it's large enough for the cops to be able to, want to be able to figure stuff out. Lots of things like that. You would say, what goes in here? And I talk a little bit about tourniquets in some of my larger library programs. I'm a big fan. They save people's lives in serious bleeding injury situations. Most places I go don't have them. If you're lucky, you may have an AED machine. If you do have an AED machine, put a tourniquet in there. You can get them in Amazon for $10. Get several and put them in there. So whether you're a library director, supervisor, pick, somebody who's in a leadership position or not, you can have, and if you're a staff member that has some say and some clout and people pay attention to you based on your position in the facility, excuse me, you can talk to elected officials or appointed officials about what's going on. And maybe, using this first point here, use national incidents, national cases around libraries. You can get a lot of them out of California, where I used to come from, about what's happening in terms of crime or violence or threats. We saw this a lot with the book banning stuff, which I think has kind of settled down a little bit. It was, pretty vehement for the last couple of years, but I think it's ebbed a little bit. And then the second part is, we had this First Amendment auditors. These protesters would come in and try to disrupt the library business. Look at these incidents and say, see what happened over here. It happened in New Hampshire, it happened in Pennsylvania, it happened in California. Can we do something to make sure this doesn't happen in our facility? Can we do best practices, some equipment purchases? Can we rewrite our code of conduct to make sure this doesn't happen in our facility? So use the national cases and incidents that you see to support the changes that you want, because again, it goes back to, for bureaucracies, people want proof rather than just a conversation. And I think it's sort of the buzzwords that elected officials and appointed officials are sometimes get a little freaked out about. Workers' comp cases, liability, claims, insurance claims, costs. I work with a lot of insurance companies. I have the biggest insurance provider for the state of California. They have 135 cities that they support. I've had them for 25 years. And a lot of what they say to their clients in terms of, do you want to hire more employees? Do you want a new city hall? Stop having so many claims. Do you want more equipment for your staff and public works and the cops and the firefighters? Stop having so many workers' comp claims. Stop having so many liability claims. And they spend a lot of time, with education and training and safety and all that stuff, so we don't get people injured or harmed, whether it's a taxpayer, a ruptured sidewalk that somebody falls over and breaks their arm, stuff like that. Those things are what elected officials should be paying attention to. So lowering costs is part of it, but also that we do the right thing to retain employees. We do the right thing to improve morale so people want to stay at the library and continue to work there. We keep the focus on the liability concerns of the money, but also we really pay attention to the people side of the business, which is we want employees that want to work there as long as they want to be there because they feel supported and the place is safe. Okay, half hour to go. See what happens when you fall in love with your sound of your own voice. You can talk away. When I talk to elected officials, they're fearful of being, negatively connected to bad stories about bad stuff happening in their facilities, whether it's, here's how we treat the homeless in this environment. Here's how we respond to race issues in this environment. Here's how we respond to, people's concerns about the environment in this issue. They don't want bad optics. And so sometimes you can say to them, look, the things that we are focusing on here, the use of these security incident reports tell you, elected official, tell you, appointed official, mayor, council member, whatever, the path is to these changes, which would be useful for us to get the news media not to focus on, well, what have you done and what have you done lately and why aren't you doing these things? And I think about, if you look at that second piece, do you have some leverage with other people besides the elected officials, friends of the library, library board? Library boards are oftentimes quite powerful. They have attorney and they have people that are, retired business people that have a lot of savvy about finance and things like that. Are there local civic and community groups, people that can donate equipment to you, security equipment? I've had these Kiwanis will buy a van for some, library to transport books or people around, stuff like that. So we want the elected officials to get the credit, right? To let them be, spectacular on TV or on the social media, but it helps us get what we need if they get what they need, which is they want to look like they're doing something on behalf of the library. And here's what I know about human beings, and you may see the same thing in your own work, is that we're oftentimes driven by events. And no one cares about library security until there's a security issue. And nobody cares about somebody being injured at the library until somebody gets injured at the library. It's not that people are hard-hearted, it's just they have so much to pay attention to. They go, well, I'm sure things are fine over there, and they'll tell me if they aren't. And so in my work, I do a lot of stuff which is post-action, post-event. Something happened and they call and go, hey, we had this guy came in and he scared the staff. Can you do training? Hey, this person came in. We had this issue about security. Can you talk to us about improving our site security? So I do an assessment of the building and give them a report. Oftentimes that stuff is driven by an event, and before the event, there was no time, energy, or money to do it. After the event, there's suddenly time, energy, or money. So what I'm saying is don't wait for bad stuff to happen to try to press your case. And you can use the security incident reports, especially as leverage, to say, here, elected official, here's what's happening in our library that you may or may not know about. Whoops, going the wrong direction. So let's talk personal safety. I talked a little bit about the pepper spray, bringing your dog in, but think about this again, who in your community, if the cops are far away, who's the next best choice? Is it state police barracks are near you? Volunteer fire department is near you. I had a case in West Virginia where this lady went missing who had Alzheimer's, and her daughter came home and the house was empty. And she went over and woke up her neighbor who was 2 blocks away, who was the volunteer fire chief, and he scrambled everybody out and they found this woman and got her to the hospital. So is there college police near you? Do you have K through 12 school police, school resource officers? Do you have railroad cops? Do you have junior college police? Is there armed sworn officers in your community in some other function besides just the PD that you may be able to say, can you do a drive-by? Can you take take a peek at me as you head from place to place in the street? Can I call you on your cell phone or some other way to get a hold of you if there's a not emergency and I don't need 911? Again, go back to the firearms laws for your community. Could be different than ones for your state. If you have that issue, people bringing in firearms into the library, it's not oftentimes a concern, but sometimes it freaks people out who don't understand why these open carry people kind of do what they do. Again, panic alarms at the desk, that would be my first choice that rings to an alarm company. If you don't have the PD in town, they don't often ring to the PD unless there's some special contract, usually rings to an alarm company. But do you have a duress alarm built into your building's burglar alarm if you have a building burglar alarm? The duress alarm says, I need to close up at 9 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock at night or whatever it is, and I have to work for a half hour, getting ready for the next day. I can turn on the duress alarm, which means if somebody breaks into the building while I'm inside, it rings the alarm. It doesn't set off as I'm walking around in there, but it rings if somebody breaks the front door, that type of thing. Again, desk-mounted front door lock would be my first choice, which is I can lock this door without getting up and going over to the front door to do it. And the last one, I would insist if I work in a building by myself all day and it's a beautiful historical building, I'm sorry, you guys are going to have to cut a door in the back for me to be able to leave so that I can get to my car in safety without having to go over the front door past the scary person. I talk a little bit in this discussion about kind of opening the lens in terms of other people knowing you're there. So do your family and friends and other patrons know when you work and when the library is open, and do other businesses nearby you know when the library is open and where you should be, and that do they ever kind of just come by and wave, the mailman, you know, people driving by, etc. So there's a sense of community around paying attention to you. Speaking of community, can we bring in Kiwanis and optimists and, you know, anybody else who wants to, you know, the quilting group, whatever it is, who wants to use the library room for meetings? And can we create more programs that let people come in and use our space? So it just changes the dynamic where you just don't see I'm sitting in here with, you know, strangers by myself all day long. I have other people come in and they have kind of a sense of protection for my environment because there's just a lot of folks there. And the other thing to pay attention to is sometimes we have daylight vigilance is not as good as nighttime vigilance. So nighttime vigilance is it's dark, I need to get to my car, I'm more cautious about walking place to place. Daylight, we don't typically see the same thing. I'm not asking you to be paranoid, right? I'm your paid paranoid, right? I'm a certified paid paranoid, right? CPP. But I think about the same issues around situational awareness, walking to the building to my car, from the building to you know, at the end of the day to my car, from my car to the building, where I have situational awareness, who's around me, what are they doing, what are they saying, what's their behavior look like, same time in the nighttime as they would during the day. Bad stuff happens during the day, banks get robbed, you know, etc. So the last one in terms of personal safety is kind of a physical demonstration that I'll do for you. It's called Secret Service Hands. Secret Service Hands is where you have your hands in a sort of prayer positions, kind of around your chest, maybe a little bit lower. And when someone's really, really threatening or scary to you, you can use this posture here to protect yourself. It looks kind of low key. I hear what you're saying, sir. I get it. I can see how this would bother you. I'm sorry that happened. You know, I'm just trying to follow the guidelines we have for this particular issue, but let's figure out what we can do. From this posture here, you can push people away or you can protect yourself, but it looks sort of low key. It's called Secret Service Hands because that's the way they stand. So Secret Service Hands is a way to just have your hands in this protective posture. It's not a boxing thing. It's not a martial arts thing. It's just Secret Service Hands. So when I look at this cat here, you can see all the number of times. This is his LinkedIn retirement photos here. He's with Trump and Biden and Obama. He's got Secret Service hands. That's how he stands, right? And so when you think about this posture here, it's protective without being overly aggressive, but you can protect yourself from this situation. The other thing Secret Service Hands does for me, if I'm using this gesture in front of somebody who makes me feel uncomfortable, what it says to your colleagues is, hey, come over and help me. I'm a little concerned about this person's behavior. I may need your help. And I couldn't have posed this guy any better, huh? So let's talk a little workplace violence. OSHA has created these 4 categories. The 5th is mine. I've created the 5th one myself. That's why it's in parentheses. OSHA has created these categories to say, how do we look at who the potential perpetrators are for workplace violence in the United States businesses? Number 1, robberies. Now, I've talked to lots of crooks. I never met someone who said, yeah, the library, that's where I'm going. That's where all the money is, right? So that's pretty unlikely. Possible, but unlikely. Second, people we provide services to, library patrons. Now, if you look at category 2, what would you say is the most dangerous 2 people on there, 2 groups on there would be students and patients. K through 12 schools and colleges and university violence, we've seen that, certainly, right? Patients in healthcare, emergency rooms can be dangerous places. Pain clinics, people that are in drug seeking can be really problematic in their behavior in healthcare. I do a lot of healthcare work. Type 3, current or former employee, quite unlikely. I've not ever seen a case of workplace violence involving a library employee. And then type 4, quite likely, which is domestic violence involving an employee, or in my world, domestic violence involving a patron. So we've seen judges say, use the library as a drop-off point for your child custody issues. And then we have that conflict in the parking lot or in the building. Sometimes a domestic violence victim will come in with or without the perpetrator, and their behavior is significantly different if the perpetrator is there. So take a look at this. Go to Library 2.0 if you're interested. At Library 2.0, I did an interview with a young lady who's a librarian in, I think it's Connecticut. And what she does is she takes old books, hardback books that they're going to weed out, and she carves out a space and she puts a cell phone in there, and she gives that to domestic violence victims that she knows of in the library. And it has a phone in it that's been donated that has telephone numbers and domestic violence hotlines and things. That's genius. So my interview with her is on the Safe Library page, and you can see what she's done to create these book safes that have telephone numbers. So category 4 is significant because we don't usually figure out that an employee or a domestic violence victim who is a patron has that issue until the perpetrator's in the room. And every woman I've ever met over the age of 12 knows that if I can't have you, nobody else can. Those guys are wicked dangerous. So we want to be cognizant of category 4. And one of the reasons that category 4 is less prevalent is because it's a shadow issue. Employees are afraid of people finding out about their personal life because they don't want to get fired. And oftentimes patrons won't say anything until they're in a serious 911 situation. Category 5, I think, is really the next generation of workplace violence, which is cyber attacks. We're seeing people shut down hospitals, power plants, water facilities, things like that. That's the one that scares me. If we look at terrorism, that's the stuff, shutting down our electrical grid would be catastrophic in this country. So the concept in the United States for the rare possibility of active shooter, that's an armed attacker, right, or an active shooter. Armed attacker would be car or vehicle or knife, something like that. And the active shooter is typically a gun, is run, hide, fight. A run out of the building, taking as many people, coworkers, yourself, colleagues, patrons as you can to get out of harm's way, get away from the bad guy or woman, right? 2, hide out, break room, restroom, conference room, supervisor's office, someplace you can lock the doors, right? Stay away from the fatal funnel, which is the doorway. Keep the bad guy out by using barricades. And barricades is furniture, things like that, books, right? Shut the lights off, stay away from the doorway. Spread out inside that room, hunker down, wait for the arrival of the police. Now, in usual situations of active shooter, the police are there and the national protocol is around 8 to 10 minutes. It could be longer in your situation wherever you're rurally located, but it's about 8 to 10 minutes. Last choice, fight back with whatever you have, fire extinguisher, books, things like that. Cover stops bullets, concealment hides you. And then the last thing I would think about in my perfect world, perfect library world, is can you do an active shooter drill once a year where you just focus on the run and the hide? For 15 minutes, we're going to do this where you leave the building. This is when you have multiple employees, or you hide out inside the building for 15 minutes. Just demonstrate you know how to do the drill. It's like a fire drill, tornado, earthquake, hurricane, anything we do in various logistical issues we have geographically where our staff knows what to do. So a couple of videos. This is a video that the Department of Homeland Security and the city of Houston, Texas created. It came out in about end of 2012, beginning of 2013. I showed it a lot in the old days. The bad guy looks like Vin Diesel. It's okay. It's not great. It's a little jarring with the shotgun. If you want to watch this video, just put in DHS, City of Houston, Texas, run, hide, fight. It'll show up on YouTube. It's about 10 minutes long. Just drag the cursor 90 seconds from the start and you'll skip all the shotgun stuff. It's okay, but I like this one even more. And the reason I showed this one, California State University System, Run, Hide, Fight, it's a cartoon. It's animated and it's aimed at students, right? But it has a general feel for us as employees and as leaders in library situations. It really resonates. I've shown this one quite a lot. People just like it. It's about 8 minutes long. It's not triggering, it's calming. I would use this to show to my kids, 14, 15 years old and above. Here's what we do at church or the mall or out in the restaurant or someplace where this rare thing might happen. But I like this concept a lot because I think it's just a better approach than the ones that Homeland Security and City of Houston, Texas did. Okay, now it's up to you to do some thinking. Man comes in and asks you for the time. You tell him, he nods and goes and sits at a nearby table. He just stares intently at you for the next 2 hours. I have this starer a lot in my work, and sometimes it's based on neurodiversity, and sometimes it's based on mental illness, and sometimes it's based on stalking, and sometimes it's based on poor social skills. What's the solution for this scenario? This may come in and happen at a rural library where you say, I'm in this room by myself, this guy's staring at me. I tell him to stop and he just continues. That's creepy, right? So what is your response? What are your thought processes to that? So that's one decent training scenario for you to think about with colleagues. Number 2, woman comes in, tells you she's living on the streets. She asks if she can use your restroom. She goes inside, locks the door. An hour later, she's still in there. You knock on the door, no response. She doesn't respond at all. The door's locked. Do you open it up with a key? Do you call 911 because it's a medical emergency or perhaps a drug overdose? Is she asleep? What do you do? In this scenario, again, with your colleagues, you can talk about this in a staff meeting conversation or in a scenario conversation. Say, what's our best practices here? Is this woman in medical jeopardy? Is it she's just being stubborn? She doesn't want to come out of there? What's some possible solutions to this? Number 3, group of local teenagers. This is going to go badly already, you can tell, right? That 12 to 15-year-old range, whether it can be a little difficult, right? Come into your library and start messing with your displays, rolling the book carts around, making noise. You ask them to leave and they refuse, right? Maybe you know some of these kids, maybe you don't. Maybe you know some of their parents, maybe you don't. The cops are too far away. You're by yourself. What is the response to this? Right? They're just defying and being disrespectful. My usual approach with this scenario here is to try to find the one that seems to be the most reasonable and/or the ringleader, and talk to that person off to the side. Hey, can I talk to you over here? You can't do that if you want to stay here. You guys have to leave. You can't do that if you want to stay here. Meaning, I can't talk to all of them. They'll peck your eyes out like chickens. But can I talk to the one that seems to be maybe the most reasonable or the most likely to be able to go back and tell the other ones what to do and then stop this nonsense? Scenario 4, a man who is angry at the town council comes into your library to ask you for legal advice. You tell him you can't give him that type of help. How many times do you get people ask you for tax help or legal advice, right? When you tell him you can't give him that type of help, he takes a gun out of his backpack, places it on the counter. Now, is he doing that to be provocative? Is he doing that because his lunch is in there and he wants to eat his lunch? That's where these therapeutic wonderment questions come in. Wow, what's that for, right? What kind of gun is that, right? I hope you're not thinking that I'm part of the problem, right? Those are the kind of questions you use to de-escalate while you try to get to a safe place. Maybe you say, I need to go out, and check something in the back, and then go outside and call 911 from a safe location. Last scenario, and then we'll come back over with Joy to some questions. A man comes into your library near closing time, sits and reads quietly. You can tell by his bags that he appears homeless. When you tell him it's time to close, he nods and begins unrolling his blanket and pulling a pillow from his bag. He says, I don't have anywhere else to go, so is it okay if I sleep here tonight? Now, the short answer is no. There's liability concerns there. I'm sure we have empathy for the situation. You don't want the guy out in the cold and by himself, but can't stay there at night. Now, here's where your library skills probably have to kick in pretty hard, right? How do I find resources for this person? Local shelters, churches, overnight place, someplace he can go, and can't be the library. But you have to have that hard conversation with that guy. So think about those 5 scenarios and guess where they came from? Rural libraries. And guess where I got them from? Rural librarians, right? Where they say, this is the things that have happened to me and to us and to our facilities, and we had to work through these scenarios. So think about these as potential conversations. And if you download a copy of my slides from this discussion here, which I hope you do, that you'll use these to stimulate some staff solutions, really centered around what your intuition says and also your code of conduct. So last thing, and I appreciate your attention for this in our conversation. I appreciate Joy bringing me in. Have the courage to do what is right for you, your colleagues, the public that we serve, the patrons we serve, and your library agency. Strive for peaceful solutions. Stop telling people to calm down, doesn't work. Stop saying to people, that's just our policy, don't use the P word. Try some other approaches like this is our guidelines, or here's the usual rules we ask you to follow. And then the last one I got from all the public health people that we were doing so much work for during the pandemic. And those of you that worked through the pandemic, thank you for all the work that you did. But I did a lot of work with public health departments, and they had a phrase which I stole and thought was pretty useful, which is educate with patience. Here's our code of conduct, here's our guidelines, here's our policies, enforce with kindness, right? People hate being told what to do, but you can talk about things in such a way where it sounds like you're encouraging that negotiated behavioral agreement. And I wish you luck, everybody, and thanks for your time and attention. Joy, back over to you for any conversations or questions that they have. Happy to take them. And again, Library 2.0,